Hello, everyone. Welcome to Achieving Success with Olivia Atkins. I'm your host, Olivia Atkins. Each week, we will discuss the roadmap of achieving your personal and professional success. We will give you real-life stories on growing personally and professionally to achieve your life and career goals with the help of some top-notch guests. Today, we are speaking with Dupe Aleru. Dupe is the founder and CEO of Dupe Creative, which strives to help Christian content creators enhance their social media presence. It is also a personal and professional development company for Christian content creators and coaches. You can learn more about Dupe by going to her website, dupecreative.com, or by emailing her at dupealeru@gmail.com. Hello, Dupe. It has been fantastic having you on the show today.
No, I'm super excited, Olivia. Thanks for having me.
To start off the show, can you tell me what success means and looks like to Dupe Aleru?
Yeah, I love these questions because it makes me just think just whatever comes to mind. And honestly, success means something differently today than it did a few years ago. And for me, that is just doing what God has called me to do here on earth. And I think that I'm in that alignment and in that purpose. It doesn't have a number of financial, income for me. It's really about impacts for me and, advancing the kingdom, doing his will, which I have surrendered to, and building community. That's really what I'm about.
And for you, you have a unique experience or background as well in the aspect of when you're really leading and building that community, you've been through it yourself, right? And I think that's so important as someone in any area to be a leader is having some experience to be able to relate to the community they're trying to build. So for you, how did you get into content creating? And then how did you decide that Christian content creating is really where you want to focus?
Yeah, I got into content creation. Well, I can say that I was creating content back in 2011, but I was kind of dabbling. It wasn't until 2015 when I found the app Periscope where I was like, okay, this is cool. It was a live streaming app. And that was the first time that I really immersed myself really on social media. And then when Periscope shut down, I moved over to Instagram. And then what really happened was my brand started to grow. I became a motivational speaker. I started speaking at live events, and then COVID hit. So when COVID hit in 2020, I had to pivot. And that's when I spent some time in solitude with God. And I was like, what do I do? Because 2020 for me was going to be my breakout year as a speaker. I had a previous year of pretty big engagements, and I had my calendar booked for speaking engagements in 2020. And as you know, those all got canceled because of the stay-at-home order. So immediately God spoke to me and said, create content online. And TikTok came up. And I was like, TikTok? This is the child's app. Why TikTok? And I remember hearing Gary Vaynerchuk, which we all know, right? Was talking and telling entrepreneurs, get on TikTok, get on TikTok. And finally, I was like, okay, let me try this thing out. And sure enough, within 1 month of creating content consistently, I grew from 0 to 100,000 followers. And TikTok ended up reaching out, asking me to be a managed creator. And the rest was really history. I think just having that amplification on that platform allowed me to build a brand in my niche. And then I learned the processes from trial and error. And I duplicated it on LinkedIn and YouTube and Instagram. And so here I am today as a business consultant and content coach and full-time content creator.
And I think, you hit something on the head there that I think is so important is finding your niche, but also adding value, right? So a lot of people can get overwhelmed with the idea. They're like, I have to put content out there, especially as a business owner or someone who's trying to grow. I got to put the content out there. But what they end up doing is just putting content to put content out. And they don't know how to get through, I want to say, the fuzziness of it, right?
Right.
I need to put the clear goggles on and get to what I'm trying to put out there what my message is. And that shows. So for you, when you're creating content or you're coaching individuals to create content, how do you help them decide where their niche is or what really brings value to the community?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great question because I always teach my clients, you start with understanding your audience's pain point. I think for you, Olivia, like just this show, right? It takes time sometimes to figure out what your audience needs. And we call this A/B testing in the world of entrepreneurship and social media. So it does take testing. It also takes market research and really paying attention to what your audience is saying. But one of the best ways to figure out like what to provide value to online is going with your inner strength. Like, what is the thing that you're so great at that nobody else can do what you do, right? Even if there are competitors and people doing something similar, the way you do it, you have your unique selling proposition, right? You have a uniqueness to the way you deliver that information. And I like to think that about what I do, right? As a content coach, there's so many personal branding and content coaches out there. However, I'm kingdom driven, like you know. So I focus on working with established, Christian entrepreneurs and professionals. And then in addition to that is the variety of content that I'm able to coach and consult, from curriculum development to short form and long form videos, to being a writer, former journalist, right? Knowing how to write content. So I always tell my clients, go with your strength, right? What's your superpower? And then go and find a community who wants to learn from you. So I like to say this sentence, ask yourself this question: what do I know that other people want to know and are willing to pay a price to learn it, right?
And I think that's a great question. And you also said it takes time and it takes the ability to pivot sometimes.
Right.
And I think that's so important. Sometimes as individuals, we go, I know what everyone needs. This is what it's going to be. But like you said, and I thought was so important there, is listening to your audience, but also understanding at the same time what your superpower really is.
Right.
Because if your audience is asking for, you to go far left, and that is not your superpower, but you just start saying yes to it anyways, it's going to deviate from what and who you are. Right. That's going to show, and it's going to drain on you too. You're not really wanting to wake up in the morning and do it and build that community.
Yes. You're so spot on, because you have to be drawn to you have to be passionate about what you're doing, right? And when you are in alignment with your purpose, it's easy, right? It's something that's just so innate, and you don't have to really work hard at it, right? Like you have to work hard at mastering your skill and always learning and growing, right? But at the same time, it's something that is so natural to you that other people may be looking at you like, how do you do that? Like, that looks so complex. And you're like, what? Like, that's easy, right? That's when you know you're in your purpose, right? It's just natural. You don't have to really like try so hard to be someone, like you said, that you're not. When you show up as authentically as yourself, right, you're going to attract your tribe. They can see that authenticity, right? So it's important.
For you, you had touched upon the fact that you had to pivot, and God spoke to you with TikTok in 2020. What was that journey like for you on how you really started to take the step back and go, okay, this isn't where I'm going to be, but I'm going to put the time and energy into this other area and really give it my all? Because sometimes people, when they have to pivot, it's not always smooth sailing because we get in our own heads.
I know. To be honest, I pivoted twice. So in 2020 was my first pivot where God was like, online content, go. And my thing was, what am I doing? What am I great at? I have the gift of gab. I'm a motivational speaker, former teacher. I have that way in empowering and educating and sharing and motivating. So I went with my natural talent, which is speaking, to be honest, and teaching. So that's how I initially built my brand. Within a year, So in 2021, a year later, I heard God's voice saying, kingdom, kingdom, like start producing kingdom content. And if you look back to some of my older videos, you'll see me sprinkle in here and there, but it wasn't in its entirety, right? My brand message still spoke to a wider audience. And it's so funny how God works, because in that season of feeling like I had so much going for me, I still wasn't satisfied in here. And that's when I surrendered. I was like, okay, God, I'm tired. Like, what do you want me to do? And I literally took a full year off on sabbatical, got closer with God, learned the word, understood clearly his vision. And that's when I rebranded my company, Dupe Creative, to what it is today.
And I think you brought up such a great point that sometimes you have to surrender and be okay with where you're going to pivot. You know, I joke that sometimes we all have our journeys and we can't always see it in the moment. But when we get there and we're in the mix of what we're passionate about, and you kind of just said, I'm going to let it flow the way it's going to flow. There's an ease about it that even like you said, in the stressful moments or the busyness of it all, you're like, okay, this is fun. Whereas when you start to do things or you're doing things where, yes, it's in alignment with what you want, but it's not your full purpose or you're not fully aligned, you start to get that feeling. So for you, once you really entered the Christian content creating space, what was the feeling like for you when you really got into your groove and was like, yes, this is where I am at?
It was, to be honest, I mean, it was kind of nerve-wracking and scary, because I know like how the world is, right? Like when you bring politics and religion to anything, like you're ruffling feathers, right? Because there's so many different differing opinions, as there should be. But I had to get to a point where I didn't care about what the world was going to say, and I cared more about what God was telling me to do. Right. So like I had to kind of shift and reframe my mindset, because I think I was living so much in a state of getting approval from other people. And I lost track of the only person I really need approval of, which I have, is God. Right. But I should be so focused on his will. And so once I was able to reframe my mind, it became easier to really not care. And then I was able to say, okay, let me just start with what I know. And it became easier. But I have to say, like, I lost money. I lost, followers. Like I lost, and when I say money, brand deals stopped, because it's association, right? I think a lot of sometimes brands and businesses don't want to really mix that, and that's totally okay. But I had to learn to be okay with that and to keep my eyes focused on the path.
And I think that's great, because when you tune out the noise around you sometimes, it really allows you to fully thrive in that as well and stand your ground. Like you said, there's, especially within politics realm and religion, there is definitely that noise or people saying, oh, don't do this because of that. And it's something where as long as at the end of the day, you're happy, you're giving your purpose, that's all that really matters.
Right.
And so for you, when Christian content creators come to you and they're like, I'm not sure if this is really, having some of those doubts of, is this really what I should be putting out? Because like what happened, you were starting to lose deals when you initially transitioned, and people get nervous of that, especially when they're a business owner, because that is their livelihood. So how do you help them kind of get through that mindset?
Yeah, I have such amazing clients, and I think I'm lucky that I have clients who, when they come to me, they have already accepted the call that God has placed in their life. So they're already in alignment to say, God has called me to do this. He told me that you're my coach. What do I need to do? Right. So it's a little bit of easier transition. I don't feel like I have to have that initial, this is what you should be doing type of thing. It's more like, go to God. He's going to tell you what you need to do. And then I'm going to help you bring his vision into fruition type of thing. And so I think what's important as kingdom entrepreneurs is that we have to ensure that we get to a place where we're comfortable in what our purpose is. So that way we can show up in the way that we're meant to show up online. And it's not easy, and everyone's going to have their different, path and timing. But I think for me, it felt like it was overnight, and I know it wasn't. But again, it's that mindset shift that you're not focused on what other people are going to say or think. Now, is it different when you own your own business and then you work for someone else? Absolutely, right? But you're seeing more and more CEOs and presidents of companies, incorporating more workplace ministry, right? And embracing the thought of having, faith as the foundation of a person's individual driver, right? So you're seeing more of it, but it's not as taboo, let's say that.
And I think as we all grow, and especially in the day with social media and accessibility and the ability for individuals to really know who they are and be comfortable enough to say, this is who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Take it or leave it, but I'm not changing for you.
Right.
I think eases into that conversation too, and understanding.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, and that's why, like, I know for me personally, and everyone's going to have their own journey, I had to take that sabbatical year off because it was beyond when God told me to create kingdom content. My first thought was, I don't know scripture. Like, I think I need to know. I'm not a pastor. Like, what do I say? Right. There's all those like fear and doubt, but God was actually telling me, no, you need to do more inner work. Right. Because the past traumas and the experiences, from childhood to now, and just certain things is going to affect how you show up if you don't resolve them. Right. So that sabbatical year was personal growth. It was mindset shift. It was, working on obviously like my spiritual growth and my journey. So it was all encompassing in order to get me to where I am today.
And I think that is just as important as growing a business or being an employee and showing up. You have to show up for yourself first.
Yes.
And sometimes we think, okay, no, we're good, or I can push through the day.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, at some point, whether we like it or not, either we're going to get stopped and forced to take the time.
Exactly.
Or we could do it on our own. And I think that's something we all have to keep in the back of our mind. And for you, even like you with this podcast, when the idea of a podcast initially got brought up to me, it was actually the publishing company that I'd written a textbook for. He said, you should really do this. Your energy, like, we don't know what on. I'm just telling you, like, you should do it. And I ended up saying no. And months went by and my time freed up. And I just, in a dream, I kept getting this, just podcast, do it, like, it just kept coming up. And after a few days, I was like, okay, I got it. Let's like actually look at this. Yeah. And it was just that continuation of like it just popping in, or the idea continuously popping into my head, where I was like, you know what, maybe this needs to be explained a little bit more or thought about a little bit more and where it can go. And I think sometimes we forget that it isn't going to be a clear, poster board sign stuck right in front of you.
Yes.
And it's that, okay, what does this mean? And that also takes the journey of sitting back and reflecting.
So, yeah. No, you're so spot on. It's discernment, right? And that only happens when, for me at least, when I spend more time with God, I'm able to now, like you said, because I think we had this conversation before, Olivia, where there's synergy in when we like got pulled to do what we're doing. Same thing with me with speaking. So many people kept telling me, you need to be a speaker. You need to do that. And I'm like, why is everyone saying that? And I used to tell my clients that when I first became a coach, this was something that I used to say all the time, is pay attention to what other people are saying about you, right? Because some people are always like, oh, I don't know what my purpose is, or I don't know what I should do. what are other people saying? Because those are usually signs. I remember when I was a classroom teacher, my students' parents would tell me constantly, Dupe, I think you should be doing something more. And I used to pick up offense because I'm like, I went through all this schooling to get like my master's and 2 teaching credentials, and you think I shouldn't be a teacher? But now I get what they were saying. They saw my potential outside of the classroom, right? So I was confined to teaching 20 students, and now I'm teaching on a mass scale, right? That's huge. And so sometimes, again, we got to pay attention to what other people are saying. And I'm glad that you made that connection. Like, wait a minute, people keep bringing this up. There's something here. Let me dig deeper. And I think that that's probably the biggest clue in order to get us on the path that God has called us.
For sure. And I think, as you're saying that story, I was laughing internally because even while when I started my consulting side of the business, I was mainly only focused on resume building, helping others with cover letters, team development, all these things, which so many people can do as well, right? And I'm like, oh my God, why isn't it coming? Or sponsorship deals with the podcast. And I'm sitting there and sponsorship deals started coming in, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm not excited about this. Like, it's the dollar amount. And then people I started having conversations with people in networking events, and everyone was like, well, what are you doing? Like, your podcast, I have a podcast. Like, what's your secret or this and that? And I heard it enough times back to back. And I was like, wait, there's a space here. There's a need. I can really help people. And now 98% of my consulting business is within the realm of podcasting, whether it's helping people get on podcasts or helping them start it. And it's something where I have different conversations like you and I've had conversations, and I'm like, wherever it goes, this is a great time because it's that passion. And you're like, okay, I'm devoted to this, and I get to really dive into it, whatever way it looks like.
You just like inspire. I mean, something you just said, and I'm like trying to listen, and then I'm also listening to like the Holy Spirit at the same time. Like, I think I told you I had a podcast back in 2018, and then I canceled it a little bit in 2019. And I've been wanting to get back to this space because, as speakers, it's just something that we can just be consistent, right? In not only sharing our gift with our community, but more so storytelling, right? Like, you never know whose story is going to impact someone else, right? And it's scary. So like, I heard the voice, like while you're speaking and while we're talking about listening to that voice, I heard the voice, you got to start your podcast. And I'm like trying to shake it away. Like, no, I'm too busy. But I know I need to do this, right? But I know how much work it takes. But there's something that you said that like really was a light bulb, was platforms like this. And I love what you're doing with the Achieving Success podcast. Is platforms like this allows people to get their message out. But more importantly, it's an amazing way to build community, right? Because as we're busy as entrepreneurs, it's not a lot of times where we can travel and we can always go to events, because that's what I used to do. I was always at networking events, and I love that. But the reality of it is we might not all the time have that capability, especially when you're working with clients like I do. So podcasting like this is the way to keep that up. So I love that you shared that, because that inner voice spoke to me, girl.
And I loved it too, because a lot of people, when they think of podcasting, they forget about the amazing community that comes with being in the podcast space, whether as guests on shows or as hosts. It's interesting to me, and you kind of brought this up, and it's making me think of like a new analogy. But when you look at your faith, whatever your faith might be, and you really are devoted in, whether it's temple, church, whatever it might be, you're going regularly, you're doing events within that community, you create a strong bond. And it's interesting because as I've moved and grown within the podcasting space, both as a guest and a host and consulting on it, the community itself is so amazing and open people are so open and want to hear stories and want to connect. And I think
Right.
that's the underlying theme of anyone who's on podcasts or a host on a podcast is that we all just want to connect. And I think especially in the day of social media where it can go so fast sometimes, the
Mhm.
extra level of communication can really help someone shine.
Mhm.
And then it's taking it the step further as well. Of then when you post on TikTok and places like that, you're really getting to have that extra level and building that community even more.
I love that. And and there's something else that I thought when you're speaking is it allows other people to still be connected to you on the go, right? The easiness of saying, you know what, I can always listen to this in my busy life, right? Whereas sometimes like on social media, like if you're going live, you either catch it or you miss it, right? Where podcasting, I think it's something that you can always go back to and listen, right? So I do love the flexibility and girl, you got my mind spinning. I have so much going on already, and you just opened up some doors that I wasn't expecting today.
Well, I gotta keep you on your
Thanks
toes.
a lot, girl.
I'm like, that's what I'm here for, to keep you on your toes.
I know, I love it.
For you, as you are getting more clients and you've continued to grow and balance the different parts of what your clients need, how do you stay centered as well?
Gosh, that's so good. Well, obviously, God, but but there's still a struggle, right? There's in the busyness. Honestly, like my circle of like friends, having people who are on similar journeys that you can always bounce back ideas, vent sometimes to, have my family. But more importantly, like God, waking up in the morning and just finding that center with him first before I like dive into the day. I think it's important. Exercise, but I think the most important decision that I've made this year in order to keep that centeredness is to spend time with myself, to incorporate self-care within my weekly schedule and to be intentional with it and to say, like Mondays and Fridays, I say they're my days off, but I mean off by I don't have any meetings or clients that day, unless it's a VIP day, of course, which I've been guilty of scheduling VIPs on those days. However, those are the days that I do personal and professional development. So pouring back into myself, learning more so that I can grow and scale in my business and better serve my clients and community. So self-care, that is key to my life to stay balanced.
And I love that. And I love the point you just brought up about not only are you designating time, but you're intentional with it and you try to stick with it. I think when we get intentional with it and we kind of try to block it off and have it become a regular thing, right? Like you said, the Fridays, unless there's those VIP clients. Because let's be honest, we all get wrapped up.
Unless
it's like, oh wait, no. To me, I take every Friday off, meaning no meetings. And I try to, have the ability to, whether it's traveling for something or standing there and going, okay, what can I do today that will help me? But sometimes those Fridays, I get busy during the week and a client will be like, hey, I can do this and that. And I'm like, I'm swamped. But you know what? I can fit you in on the Friday, or we can circle back to this on that Friday. But sometimes if you're not intentional with it, it's a lot easier, whether it's that self-care to say, oh, I can push it off. It's okay, right? A lot of people think about that with the gym. They start the new year and they're like, I'm going to the gym every day. And 2 weeks go by. And then every day goes like once a week. And then the once a week by February is no-go.
Right, exactly.
So as you are busy and you're trying to be intentional with your time, even when things tend to creep up, because as someone who's successful and a go-getter like yourself, sometimes you can get in the mindset of, okay, I can take a little time away from the self-care to do this or that. How do you remind yourself that, no, this is important. This is just as important?
No, I mean, I did that yesterday. One of my clients, right after our group coaching call, I do quarterly calls with my clients and who are within my CCA Academy, Christian Creators Academy. And this cohort, I have two cohorts, which is insane. I know. I have two group coaching programs running right now. And cohort A, I call it. One of the clients was like, "Oh, when's our next quarterly call?" And I said, "You have one more and it's in December." She's like, "Oh, I need to ask you something." I'm like, "Sure." Like, I don't mind like hopping on like a 15-minute call. And then so when she messaged me in our group chat, she said, "Oh, how about Friday?" And I said, "Absolutely not." Like, you guys know my hours. I said, "You know the business hours, girl. Don't play with me." Like, it's Monday through Thursday for my clients. And she was like, "I respect that." She's like, "I totally forgot." She's like, "Okay, we're speaking today." So I said, "You're going to call me during my time that's free, but I'm going to be multitasking." I said, "I'm probably going to be at Trader Joe's, but I'll pop in the AirPods and we can have that conversation because I'm still valuing what I have to do, right? You're now scheduling time within my free time. So it's going to look differently. We're not going to hop on a Zoom. So like you said, I'm learning to be flexible and understanding that some people have immediate needs, but then they need to understand that this is my personal time and it's going to not look like the normal, let's hop on Zoom, take out your notepad type of thing. So yeah, that literally happened last night.
And that I think is so important too, is saying that to someone. Yeah. Like, if I agree to free up my free time and give that time to you, it's not going to look the same. Right. You have to be okay with that. And I actually also had that conversation yesterday with someone who was like, can we do a call on Friday? And I was like, I will be traveling on Friday, so I can't hop on a Zoom. Luckily, I'll be driving, so I could do a call and I'm not flying. But I was like, it would be a call. It's gonna come through my Bluetooth, so there might be spotty connections at point. Right. And I'm not gonna be able to take the notes. So,
but you know what though, Olivia, I have to admit, I travel because my parents live about 4 hours away. I live in Southern California. They live in Central. And when I go home for the holidays or to visit, that's usually time that I do schedule like chats either with my friends to catch up or even sometimes with clients because it kills the time. I'm not going to lie. So like I get there faster because I'm on the phone the entire time. I'm like, oh, I'm already here. 4 hours have passed. Wow. So it's actually a great time to connect. I have to admit.
I will say the fact you just said that, I was laughing because I'm going to Connecticut. Okay. And I went to school in Connecticut. I went to school at Quinnipiac. So I'm used to the drive. It's like a 3.5 hour drive, depending where you're going, right? Right. Within the state, because any state, let's be honest, there's a top and a bottom to any state. It can take a lot. But for me, when I used to go back and forth a lot, there was 2 years that almost for the 2 years completely, I was driving back and forth from Connecticut weekly. Oh, wow. So I would do a 3-hour drive every Sunday and then a 3-hour drive every Thursday. Because at first I started off, and this is where we all also need to set boundaries. I started doing it when I got a role when COVID hit that was based out of Connecticut, but our clients were everywhere. So we were not going into the office and they knew I lived far away and they were fine with it. And then as things started to shift and people got more comfortable, my boss at the time somehow convinced upper management that we needed to be in the office. And it went from like, okay, yeah, I could do the once a week drive to they got us to go in the office 4 days a week. And I was gun ho. I was like, you're not going to convince me to move here. So I will do this drive every day. Let's say like after a month, I was like, this is eating up.
That's insanity, girl. I don't even know how you did it for a month. When I worked, and this is not to cut you off, but this is just to let you know, like that drive will never work for me. I got a job as a reporter for the Beverly Hills Courier newspaper, and I live in Long Beach, California, and to Beverly Hills is like a 45-minute drive. But in LA traffic, it's like 2 hours, right? That did something mentally for me. Like I could not even bear it. I ended up going to my publisher and I said, I can't do this. Like after I'm telling you, I would be crying on the way home because I was so tired. And it was like 8 p.m. I wouldn't get home till 10. And then they get ready for bed and I have to wake up at 6 a.m. and do it all over again. It was too much. And finally he agreed. He was like, okay, you can work from home. Like you can, you created all your contacts. You can do all the reporting. Just come into the office like once a week, to lay out the paper, to lay out your portion of the paper and you'll be good. And I did that because, girl, I was about to quit that job.
Well, I ended up leaving. And now, ironically enough, when you tell me, if you regularly would have to drive like 45 minutes, I'm like, how can you, like, my brain just goes, I think back to the place of the super long drives. But during that time, the one thing that I enjoyed and my friends really started to enjoy was I would do the calls in the car. And what I would do is I would have on a Sunday night, the people I'm going to hit. They're available. But I would leave at different times on a Sunday. So it would depend what's going on. So I'd call like the first person and they'd pick up. They're like, oh, so you're driving. I'm like, yeah, I got some time. They're like, you must have left. You must have been on your way. And like, it got to this point where I'd routinely get the same people on Sunday and then have a group of people I would always touch base with on Thursday on the way home. And everyone started to know, they're like, okay, well now it's my day. But it was also great because it held, especially within friendships, like kind of that accountability of we're going to show up for each other. Even though life gets crazy, this is how we can show up and say, here's our touch base. What do you need? Or do you need a vent? What does that time look like?
I love that. No, I agree. I've been there. It's amazing. But yeah, those drives, girl, it's not for me. I've worked from home for too long now that it would be impossible for me to do that.
Well, and that's the thing now. I'm like yourself. I'm a social butterfly, right?
Yeah.
So I love being able to talk to different people, and sometimes I could talk for a long time. But I think, there's the ability to work from home and work anywhere that really creates a flexibility. But I've found times where I've gone a day of either really back-to-back meetings that have a purpose, which is great. All meetings, I think, should have some form of you go in it with some form of mindset.
Absolutely.
But in that too, even though you've had those meetings, you get done the day and you're like, where was my connectivity? I need more of those juices. But I also go when people are like, oh, will you show up? I still do a lot in the state of Connecticut. I sit on some of their state boards and they'll be like, just show up to this meeting. You used to drive up here all the time. I'm like, no, we can do this remote. Let's see what we can really do. But yeah, now when you say it to me and you're like, oh yeah, that's going to be a regular drive. I'm like, let's see what we can really do about this.
Exactly. I love it, Olivia.
So for you, as you continue to grow and challenge yourself, how do you hold yourself accountable in the different areas of your life?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I do have goals in every area. And I think for me, it's just being mindful. They're actually just yesterday, or 2 days ago, I was thinking oh, wow, we're already Q4, we have a little bit more left in 2023. And I've accomplished a lot of the goals that I set. And every year in January, I set personal goals, my spiritual goals, I set my financial goals, and even my business goals. And so I make sure this is just something that I've done over the last, I would say 3 to 4 years. I haven't always done it in these categories, but I've been intentional to always go back and look at my notes to make sure that I'm on track and I'm holding myself accountable to the things that I set for myself at the beginning of the year. So I'm pretty good at that. I have to say, I think if I do fail in any area, it's definitely relationships with my friends, because I'm always busy. And I had a conversation with one of my closest friends last night. She's like, I would appreciate if you came out, and spend more time. And she's like, instead of us just going to each other's houses, let's go out and do something. I'm like, okay, you're right. I'm going to get better at that. So even just having friends holding you accountable, I think it's huge. So yeah, that's how I balance it.
And I love that, because sometimes it is understanding where we lie in the moment, right? We go in directions and we change throughout time. But it's also having that group of friends, if it's relationships in friend zones or whatever it might be, that also will hold you accountable and say, hey, listen, you're not showing up the way I need you to show up, or this is what I need right now. And being like, we said this and then I never heard from you, or this and that. And being able to have that open conversation, I think, and that level of accountability is so important.
I agree.
Dupe, how can people get in contact with you if they want to connect with you?
Yes, just my name, Dupe Aleru, on every social media platform. So at Dupe Aleru, easy. My website, like you mentioned earlier, davicreative.com or dupealeru.com. And just social media. Like, I mean, I'm always, that's what I do, right? So like, if you want to get in touch, just DM me. I always respond. And I would love to connect. And I'm just so appreciative of this platform, Olivia. Thank you so much.
Well, I loved having you on, and we could have kept talking. Let's have gone for a lot longer, and we will definitely keep talking. And you might be a guest that comes back. You might make a second appearance.
Absolutely. I love that.
Well, thank you, Dupe, for all of your insights today. A few of our key takeaways from today's conversation is understand your audience and their needs. But remember, it takes time. You're not going to dive into something, even if you're understanding your audience, and go from 0 to 100 within 24 hours. It's going to take time. It's going to sometimes take pivots, but it's all part of the journey. And be okay with that journey, as well as ask yourself, what is your inner strength that you can provide that others can't? What is your superpower? And remember that. And sometimes even when you forget it, remind yourself with that question, and it will really give you clarity as well as pay attention to what others are saying, because it can really be advice to you in a different direction and open your eyes to things that you might have not even thought of. This was a great episode with our top-notch guest, Dupe Aleru. Thank you for listening and have a successful day.